Whenever you see a chart, the first thing that you must train your eyes to assess is the ascendant. That is the absolute first step of beginning the process of assessment of any horoscope. The chart that I have in front of us is one of the individuals who, through his comment on YouTube, requested that I have a look at the chart. And my intention of having a look at the chart is to train the viewers via a framework to assess their own chart. So let's begin with the first step. The first step, as outlined, is to have a look at the ascendant, and when you see the ascendant, you want to see what number is represented there. You will note that the ascendant is represented by the number 9, which means that the first house is owned by the zodiac of Sagittarius. Now, we know that Sagittarius is owned by Jupiter as the planet, and the next step, after having analyzed the first house, you want to see where is the lord of the first house placed, and there you will note that Jupiter is in the 12th house, very similar to the chart that I discussed for the Leo ascendant just a few days ago. So, once again, the first step of analyzing your Kundali after having entered your date, time, and place of birth on any software would be to have a look at the first house. See the number that is represented there, then refer to this table here. You will see that the number 9 is Sagittarius, the ruler of which is Jupiter, and then ask yourself the question, where has Jupiter gone? And then once you see that the answer is the 12th house, then you can refer the table that we discussed earlier, that the 12th house represents losses. It is the house of loss. It is obviously the 12th house which represents isolation. It is a house of liberation also and spirituality. And individuals who find either their sign lord or the sun or the moon placed in the 12th house benefit greatly when they begin healing others. The nature of healing obviously depends on the zodiac that is here and the lord that is there. We know Jupiter is the Karak of religion and spirituality, so here the nature of healing would represent religion and spirituality. Being a didactical mentor to others and teaching others is basically when this Jupiter becomes very happy. We will see that Jupiter is in the Scorpio zodiac and Scorpio is in the 7th house, which means that is the Lord of Scorpio. Mars is in the 7th house, which means all of this advice and this teaching, didactical mentorship role has to be played with people who are there, who are in his immediate relationships, such as spouse, business partners, etc. That is all the physical significations of the 7th house. Now, once we have noted where who's the zodiac in the first house, who is the lord of that zodiac, where is that lord placed, the next important place that I would like to draw your attention to is this table here, which is basically talking about the natural friendships of any planet. We need to know this table by heart, and through practice you will memorize this. So since we are talking about Sagittarius and we know that the planet owning it is Jupiter, we will see that Jupiter considers Sun, Moon, Mars and Rahu as a natural friend. Jupiter considers Saturn and Ketu as a neutral. In other words, Jupiter neither has friendly relations nor an enmity with this planet. And Jupiter absolutely hates Mercury and Venus. This relationship is very important, and also what becomes important is how do the other planets treat Jupiter. For example, Sun considers Jupiter as a friend, Moon considers Jupiter to be a neutral, Mars considers Jupiter to be a friend, Mercury, here I have not mentioned, but actually Mercury considers Jupiter to be neutral. Venus considers Jupiter to be neutral. Saturn also considers Jupiter to be neutral. Rahu considers Jupiter to be a friend. And Ketu considers Jupiter to be neutral. In other words, while Jupiter hates Mercury and Venus, no planet hates Jupiter. And Jupiter loves Sun, Moon, Mars and Rahu. This is true for every Sagittarius ascendant. But what becomes critical is where are they placed in the chart. Here I would like to add that if there is a conjunction, or if these planets are placed 5 9 or 6 8 distances away, then they will become temporary enemies. I will explain this later. But for now, memorizing and knowing this table is critical. So let's move to the chart. So now that we understand that who are Jupiter's friends, who does Jupiter consider friendly, who does Jupiter hate, that is, we know that Jupiter hates Mercury and Venus, it is impossible for a practicing astrologer to recommend to a Jupiter ascendant the stone of either emerald or diamond. It should simply be banned. There is no way in which you will give the natural enemy of the sign lord to yourself or your potential clients or anyone who comes within your sphere of influence. The purpose of wearing the gemstone is only to enhance the positive qualities of a particular planet. A neutral planet is fully capable of giving negative results, but the neutral planet also balances it out with some positive results. But since it is structurally capable of giving negative results, we will never recommend stones of planets which the ascendant considers to be neutral. Finally, we will only see those planets which the ascendant considers to be a natural friend for the potential of using gemstone as a means of remedy. And before doing that, we have to see how are these planets placed relative to the ascendant in order to figure out whether or not the gemstone is even suitable for them. So let's focus on Sun, Moon, Mars and Rahu in this chart. We will see Sun, Mars and Rahu are all present in the 7th house. And we will also see that the 7th house is forming a 6-8 relation with Jupiter, which means that let's understand this, I'll make the 7th house the first house. And then from here, if you count where Jupiter is, you will see this is the first house, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. Which means that even though Sun, Mars and Rahu are all supposed to be Jupiter's friends naturally, but because they form a 6-8 relation with one another, they are only behaving as neutrals in this chart. And like I mentioned, that it is impossible to give the gemstone of a neutral planet to either yourself or to your client, because we do not want to see the exaggerated versions of the downsides which are possible. Last, let's have a look at Moon. And we will note that Moon is 4 houses away from Jupiter in this chart. In other words, Jupiter is very friendly to Moon, but since Moon structurally considers Jupiter to be neutral, Moon cannot be considered as a gemstone for this ascendant. That is, if you look at Moon here, Moon considers Jupiter to be neutral, and in such a relationship, we do not offer the gemstone of Moon. There is also another reason for not offering the gemstone of Moon. That is, if you see the 8th house of Cancer, Moon is the lord of this house, and of the 3 dusthanas, which is 6, 8 and 12, and of the 4 difficult houses, which is 3, 6, 8 and 12, the 8th house is absolutely the toughest. Therefore, it becomes impossible to recommend the lord of the 8th house's stone to yourself or your clients. And then when we focus on the Moon, we notice that the Moon is actually not aspected by any planet. Here I would like to draw your attention on what are aspects. All planets have a 7th aspect, which means all these planets, exception being Ketu, because Ketu is said to have no visibility. But all these planets here, Rahu, Mercury, Mars and Sun, all have a 7th aspect, which means all of them are looking at the ascendant. Similarly, Venus too has a 7th aspect and is looking at the 2nd house from the 8th house. Saturn also has a 7th aspect and is looking at the 5th house. And similarly with Jupiter looking at the 6th house. In other words, none of these planets with their 7th aspect the Moon. Now, Mars has also two other special aspects, which is the fourth and the eighth aspect, and we will see through that fourth aspect, Mars is aspecting the 10th house, and the eighth aspect aspects the second. Jupiter has a 5-9 aspect, and from here we will see that since Moon is just 4 houses away, Jupiter is not aspecting Moon also. Saturn has a 310 aspect, and this exalted Saturn is aspecting the ascendant, and with the 10th aspect, this is the 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th aspecting the 8th house. In other words, Saturn is also not aspecting the Moon. The next thing we will notice that there is no planet on the 12th house or the second house from the Moon. And the third thing we will note is that Moon is currently, that the natal Moon that at the time of the birth is in the house of Aquarius. And if we see the transit, we will note, just for simplicity, I will set this as house number 1. Now this is the chart as the person is experiencing just now. We will note that the natal Moon is in the house of Aquarius, and Saturn currently has just entered Pisces. In other words, in addition to whatever was discussed, that is lack of aspects, no planet in the 12th, the individual is also going through a Saati. And this Saati will continue till 3rd of June 2027, which means we are looking at the last 2.5 years of the person's Saati. The situation where the person finds his moon in is known as Kendram Dosh. I have basically briefly outlined what is the theoretical description of a Kendruma Dosh. A Kendruma Dosh literally means the lonely tree. And this only happens with Moon. Moon, as we have discussed in this table, is the most diplomatic planet. Other than Rahu and Ketu, Moon has no natural enemies. And Moon considers almost everyone to be a neutral, even if it is Venus and Saturn. Moon does not like to be alone. And whenever you see a chart in which Moon is alone, that becomes the first point of assessment after the initial steps that we had done, that is, note the ascendant and where it is placed. And once we see, we will note that Moon, which basically represents the mind, the emotion, wealth, material comforts, relationships, and overall mental well-being, alongside indirectly affecting one's career and profession, its isolation and this formation of Kendrama Dosh can lead to the points outlined below. The fact that the word dosh is used here is an indicative that it is not going to be positive. And since these are the issues, the individuals with Kendruma Dosh must, under all circumstances, focus on remedy of Moon. So the question is, what would be the remedy of Moon? There are many remedies for a planet. A simple remedy could be just giving sugar to red ants on a Monday, or visiting Shiva temples on a Monday and donating milk, or donating white products which are meant for eating, such as rice. Under no circumstances should you ever wear silver or pearl. But the most important remedy, or the simplest way that this individual can significantly improve his quality of life, would be to do the Bij Mantra of Moon 44,000 times in a span of less than 1.5 months. It doesn't take that much time. It is possible to do it, and many people have benefited from it. Having a moon in this position makes the person very hardworking, and seeing so many houses in the 3rd, 7th, and the 11th house, which is all calm, which means relationships. All these houses represent relationships. Relationships are going to be the theme for this individual's life. And Saade Saati as a phase is not the most optimal for relationships in general. That's basically because any weakness in any relationship is tested in this phase. It is said that things that end in the Saade Saati end permanently, and also things that start in the Saade Saati and last till that phase will remain forever. So, focus on building relationships with positive people, people with whom you can benefit and who see a benefit in you. And build this habit, because these positive relationships that you create, if they survive for the next 2.5 years, they will provide significant positive returns to you for the remainder of your life. So, to conclude, I would not recommend a gemstone of any planet for this chart. And I would strongly recommend the individual consider donating moon and doing the moon beej mantra in order to mitigate the results of the Kendra dosh, which are only getting exaggerated as Saturn transits through the natal moon and is just a few degrees away from the natal moon. But as this transit and as this distance of Saturn keeps increasing from the natal moon, there will be improvements. With that in mind, I hope that this assessment has been useful for the individual to some extent, and also to you in order for you to assess your own charts at a later date. I wish you all the best.